Why don't we catch up on some Florida football right here at the Voice of College Football? Appreciate you all stopping by. Of course, we've got David Waters here from Gators Breakdown. It is the go-to when it comes to the Gators. David, how you doing today?
Pretty good, Mark. Pretty good. Just it's been about a week since Florida hit the field for fall camp. So, of course, the big news of Montrell Johnson's injury, that's kind of the headline so far. Still kind of underwear practice for right now. Pads coming on pretty soon, and maybe we'll get some more about what's coming out of fall camp. But, is what it is right now.
Well, I was going to ask about the running back position at some point. So let's start right there since you mentioned Montrell Johnson. So what Florida's had, obviously, with he and Travis Etienne has been a 1-2 combination that's been as good as any in the SEC. Now, assuming that Montrell Johnson's going to be okay long term, we've got Cam Carroll coming in from Tulane. He's had his own injury issues. We got Tawan Webb, if I pronounced his first name correctly, in regards to possibly a complementary guy. So how do you think that 1-2 combination is going to work out this year?
Yeah, you mentioned Cam Carroll as well. And Mark, he got injured last year. I don't know if he'll be available this year. He missed spring as well. And, he's still kind of recovering from that. And he suffered a major knee injury last year. So it may just be for his benefit to take another year off. And with losing Montrell Johnson after this year, help be another guy in the rotation next year. So, but look, we're talking 2024 season right now, and as I said, fall camp not getting off to the best injury news. Now, look, it's not serious for Montrell Johnson. He still may play the Miami game. From everything I can gather, it probably less than 50% chance, but we'll see. It came out Saturday that he got injured Friday evening's practice. Billy Napier did have a press conference Saturday, but the word about the injury didn't really start filtering out till after the press conference, so nobody got to ask him about it. But once I started hearing about it, I did reach out to Florida. They replied back to me saying he had a knee scope. He's week to week. So we'll see what that means for Florida. Of course, you have that early season stretch. You open up with Miami. 2 weeks later, you play Texas A&M. So, you want Montrell Johnson back as soon as you can get him back, but you don't want to sacrifice him for the rest of the season if you're bringing him back too early as well, just because of how tough and hard the schedule is for the Gators. So Trayon Webb will be the first guy up and coming from here in Jacksonville. I followed his high school career. He got a few carries last year, so he'll be the guy. And then Florida's really excited about the two true freshmen that they have. Jaden Ball put together a really good spring game, but a really good spring as well. KD Daniels, who mostly played in a run-heavy offense as a quarterback, had a really good spring as well. And then Jacoby Jackson was a JUCO transferred in last year. Didn't play a whole lot, but he may be pushing for the number 2 reps right now. So as pure running backs, Mark, Florida feels pretty good about where they're at. But of course, these guys are young. There's a lot of inexperience there. So you kind of turn the page and expand out what you ask running backs to do, and pass blocking and pass catching is part of that as well. So those guys being inexperienced, if it's 3rd and 7 against Miami in the third quarter and you need a big conversion, are those guys going to be able to hold up in pass protection for Graham Mertz? So, as pure running backs, I don't think there's much of a question. Those guys can get the job done as well. Billy Napier's had pretty good track record of playing young running backs. Montrell Johnson back at Louisiana, Trevor Etienne a couple of years ago there at Florida. They recruit and develop running backs pretty well, but at the same time, with the inexperience, are these guys going to be ready to do the other things they are asked for in this offense?
David, I don't know that if people nationally, because of the record the last couple of years, really understood how good Ricky Pearsall was until maybe they watched the NFL draft and realized what NFL scouts thought of him, because he was really that good. Is there going to be a collection of guys that has to fill that void, or with Shamir Dike, Elijah Badger, maybe somebody else on the roster, another alpha dog go-to guy?
Well, that alpha dog is going to be Trey Wilson, who was the true freshman last year for Florida. He's going to be the alpha dog. He's, from everything I can gather in this first week, Mark, when I said there ain't not much coming out, well, what is coming out is Trey Wilson's unguardable right now. So good news for Florida on that front. And kind of going back to the running game a bit, that can also be limited. Montrell Johnson, if he's going to miss some time, Mark, can also be limited by this Gator passing attack. You got Graham Mertz coming back in his second year. You got a weapon like Trey Wilson. You mentioned Elijah Badger and Shimre Dike transferring in as well. That I do think as a top 3 receiving core is better than what Florida had as a top 3 receiving core last year, even with Ricky Pearsall. I do think the potential of the top 3, and so Florida's a little bit deeper at the position, I think, at wide receiver than they were a year ago. It won't be mostly Ricky Pearsall. It won't be mostly Trey Wilson. I think they can count on other guys as well, mainly through the guys in the transfer portal, but Marcus Burke is turning heads for a do-or-die year for him. Khalil Jackson got a lot of snaps last year, and then they're really looking for the true freshmen from last year, Andy Jean and Aiden Mizell, to step up their games as well. So I think Florida is deeper, at the wide receiver position, and I do think, with the way Billy Napier's recruited, having a quarterback come back like Graham Mertz, I think you could see that maybe Florida was going to start turning the page and opening up this offense a bit more anyway.
At the quarterback position, we'll stay right there. When you've got a stud like DJ Lagway waiting in the wings, does he become more of that traditional third string quarterback because he's developing, or they just don't deal with guys like that anymore? You got to get him on the field as soon as possible. If something happens to Graham Mertz, it's not going to be this Colorado State transfer, or I can't think of the redshirt freshman who played last year, Brown. How do you think that depth chart lays out?
Yeah, of course, Graham Mertz comes back second year. It's his team. It's his offense. DJ Lagway is the number 2, Mark. He's not your third string. Clay Millen, the Colorado State transfer that you discussed. Look, he started some games at Colorado State. So you're talking about depth at a position. Florida's deeper at quarterback, too. Max Brown, who you mentioned, who started the FSU game last year, he transferred to Charlotte. For Florida, you got 3 guys there I think you'd feel confident in somewhat. Mertz, of course, him coming back, 6th year overall. Lagway, the star stud. And then if you get the Clay Millen, it still would send, with this schedule, it would certainly be, call 911 and you'll see what happens with an emergency for Florida. But at least he started some games. At least he's played a lot of college football. And you would see, if you get that far, I don't think you will, but if you get that far, at least there's something there, more so than there was with Max Brown last year. So yeah, it's going to be Graham Mertz. DJ Lagway, I think, will get snaps. I think he will play, for lack of a better comparison. Chris Leak, Tim Tebow situation that we saw in 2006 for Florida, maybe something similar to that. I could see Lagway getting 10 snaps, 15 snaps a game if it comes to it, short yardage situations, red zone situations. But it's, make no mistake about it, Mark, even with that, this is Graham Mertz's team. They really are behind Graham Mertz. Now, if the season goes, even with that, if the season doesn't go the right way, if there's a bad start, do you turn the page somewhat to build up DJ Lagway? But at the same time, Mark, we know how difficult November is for Florida. Do you throw DJ Lagway against Georgia, against Texas, against LSU, Ole Miss, Florida State? So I think there's a balancing act as far as that goes as well.
So we can clip that off, David. David Waters says this is going to be like 2006. We'll just leave it at that.
Sure. If you want to get Gator Nation stirred up, or everybody else out there stirred up too, Mark, first. Yeah, go ahead.
So this kind of popped out to me in reviewing some things as I'm working through all this material with all these teams, trying to soak up as much information. I don't know that this can be explained. Did you realize this rushing defense gave up 6.2 yards per carry on the road and 3.3 in the swamp? I never came across a stat where the defense changes that considerably, in the trenches, just because of they're playing in different grass.
Mark, I'll give you 2 games and why that is so
lopsided.
The Kentucky game at Kentucky and at LSU. I mean, there you go.
Daniels, yeah. What, 240, right, something like that?
Exactly. Yeah. So just look at those 2 games, and that's pretty much your story. Yeah. That's all you need to know about that. So, Mark, of course, you look at this defense, and it probably does start up front. I think a lot of people will go and look at the safety position because they gave up a lot of big plays, but going to your stats, there's a lot of big plays they gave up in the run game as well. And a lot of it was because it just could not tackle. It was not a very physical defense last year. There were, just getting past the defensive line. I said it starts up front, but, there were times when a big play would happen because a linebacker would come up or a safety would come up and not be able to tackle. They could not limit the big play. That happened time and time again for this Gator defense. But if they're dominant up front, you can protect your back end a little bit. So that's where I'm going. It starts up front there for the Gators. And they're deeper there. Cam Jackson, Caleb Banks, both come back. You get Joey Slackman, who was the Ivy League Defensive Player of the Year last year, or Defensive Lineman of the Year last year. He comes in to give Florida some depth. They're really high on Jamari Lyons, who played a good bit last year, I think maybe split time with Cam Jackson, not necessarily back up Cam Jackson, but split time with him. And then they're moving Kelby Collins, who shined as a true freshman last year. They're moving him inside to that strong side defensive end spot and are really high on his potential in his second year. Let's not forget about five-star freshman LJ McCray, who is going to be up there on that front as well. So I do think they are deeper, Mark. I don't know what that means for playmaking potential. I think there's a lot more bodies to throw at the issue that Florida had last year, but still have to solve, still have to go out there and prove that just because you have more numbers, that those numbers will actually be better.
Did I get this right that Desmond Watson weighs 440 pounds?
Yeah, Mark, that is a storyline. I think he's still going to be limited in snaps. Of course, he's that run stuffer at that size. It seems to be they don't want him that big. They would love for him to get the weight under control. It seems like if he loses it, it's very easy for him to bring it back. It's kind of just a ping pong situation with Des Watson. I think he certainly has a role, but with Ron Roberts coming in as this veteran voice on the defense, he's kind of plays a no-nonsense style of approach, in how you approach the game of football. So it's going to be very interesting to see with this new strength and conditioning program if that benefits a player like Des Watson so he can have more snaps and help out those guys in the middle.
So the defense wilted down the stretch last year. You mentioned Ron Roberts. What is he doing to fix that?
Mark, it's not going to be fundamentally, philosophically, all that different. Austin Armstrong was the defensive coordinator last year for Florida, still going to be the defensive coordinator, but they bring in this kind of executive head coach there in Ron Roberts, who, like I said, has a lot of experience. It's the same defense, but can you identify some of the things that a young defensive coordinator like Austin Armstrong struggled with last year? Because, Mark, down for down, this Gator defense actually was better than the previous year's defense, but it would be a 3rd and 8 and they would give up a huge play. Third down issues still, they were better overall, but still, crunch time would still miss and they would just give up the big play. And that was the calling card with Austin Armstrong. That was kind of his reputation coming into Florida. Good defensive coordinator, but maybe with more talent, could he help not give up the big play? Well, the big play still reared its head with Austin Armstrong as a defensive coordinator in his first year at Florida. So I think it's going to be Ron Roberts coming in, as I mentioned, tackling earlier. I think starting with the fundamentals, like I said, so many big plays. Florida was actually in position to stop, but would get bowled over by an offensive player that, the defenders are in such great position to make a play and just don't make a play. The offensive player makes the play. So I think it's getting back down to fundamentals. And look, even Jason Marshall said it, Mark, he's in his 4th year. He's played a lot of football for the Gators. Like he said, he lost confidence last year. So I think going through spring camp, going through fall camp right now, it is getting the confidence back on that side of the football.
Please like the video and subscribe here at the Voice of College Football. Of course, this is David Waters, Gators Breakdown. Make that a destination as well, even if you're not a Florida football fan. If you just love college football talk, of course, from the SEC and from Florida. Recruiting's been pretty quiet across the country for the most part. If you're not in Auburn, Alabama, I don't know if you recognize, they seem to be coming up with the top 50 player like every 3 days down there. They've opened up the vault or something. But on the Florida front, is there anything looming?
Yeah, Bryce Fitzgerald, and let's see, Ben Hanks Jr. Those two. Hanks, his dad played at Florida under Steve Spurrier. He's got a decision coming up in the next couple of weeks. Fitzgerald has a decision coming up in about 10 days as well. I'd say right now, Florida looks good for both those guys. But we'll see. You're in some battles with Florida State and Miami for those guys. maybe Louisville as well for Fitzgerald. So we'll see what it comes down to at the end. But yeah, Mark, those are the two big names that you're looking for right now. On the heels of a couple of weeks ago, Vernell Brown III committing to the Gators, on the verge of being a 5-star player. His dad, his grandfather played for the Gators. A lot of family lineage there to the University of Florida for Vernell Brown. It was a big win for Billy Napier because you were in that battle against Ohio State, against Florida State, against Miami. So it was a big 3 in the state of Florida battle, and Ohio State, who's wide receiver U right now. So it was a big win for Billy Napier. They didn't want to necessarily rely on that legacy angle for him, Mark. He wanted Florida to pitch, what they could do for him outside of, hey, just come here because your family did. He wanted to be recruited, away from the legacy angle. So big pickup a couple of weeks ago there for Vernell Brown. And Mark, one also probably shouldn't be shied over. It will be a little bit, I think, from a national perspective, but Demetrius Samuel, who was a top 100 player in the 2026 class, he was committed to Syracuse. Florida flipped him, and he reclassified to this 2025 class. So Florida got his commitment last week. As I said, he was a top 100 player for 26. Obviously, won't stay as a top 100 player for the 25 class, but definitely lets you know the potential of him and what the recruiting services were thinking of him at the time. So it was a big pickup there for Florida after they missed out on a couple of safety prospects already in this class. To circle back around and get a player like Samuel Jr. Was a big win for Billy Napier and the Gators as well.
David, I'm going to finish this off probably with the topic you've covered about 87 times because you probably talked to me about it like 3 times during the offseason. But it's just this overarching theme about Florida football this year that actually people are making fun of. Florida's got to run this gauntlet. There's no way they're going to make it. Billy Napier is going to get fired. They're going to win 5 games. The Vegas over-under, I think, is 4.5.
Yep.
Good Lord. This team is too good for that. But, you got to, I don't know how you play that because I know you love tough schedules and you don't like the cakewalk games. But, man, part of you's got to feel like envious of Miami. They're going to walk away from that game. And this may sound ridiculous, but if Florida State falters a little bit, Florida may turn out to be the best team that they play all year. And they're about the 8th best team, maybe, that Florida plays. It just seems like, man, so much is going against this program from that perspective of this ridiculous schedule that they have to play. The last time Florida's had a big season, of course, was 2020. So you've been waiting. This is a proud program and you love your football and you got to wait all off season just to see a football game. And you haven't seen a good football season since 2020. And this is, a time when people are already writing you off. Just the enthusiasm level or the try to conjure up enthusiasm level if you're a Florida fan with what seems to be a difficult season that's facing this team.
Yeah, Mark. I mean, this schedule's been talked about, like crazy, and we got 3 weeks, before it kicks off. And as you said, I'm a big fan of a tough schedule, and this might be overdoing it a bit, but at the same time, I think if this thing is headed in the right direction, Mark, 7-8 wins is certainly attainable if it's headed in the right direction. I think there's enough talent for 7-8 wins. Now it's up to the coaching staff to get those 7-8 wins, and 7 wins might. I can see either way. I can see some of the fan base still being in limbo for 7 wins, and I can see where you can sell 7 wins because of this schedule. I think 8 wins, 8-4 with this schedule, you can point to, look, you got one cupcake, and that's Samford. So that means out of the schedule, just go look at it. That means 7 of those 8 wins would be pretty good wins. Mississippi State is your next worst team after that. Everybody else is going to be fighting for bowl contention on that schedule. So there'll be, 6 pretty good wins if you get to 8 wins somehow with this schedule in this year for Billy Napier. So 8 wins, I think you can feel better about, and maybe in what you feel good about moving forward with DJ Lagway at quarterback in the 2025 season, where the schedule's pretty much the same next year, but I think it does ease up with some of the teams and the quarterbacks they lose this year, and it being the same teams, but so much changing with those teams. So I think 8 wins is probably that mark. That win mark where the fan base starts to feel better. But Mark, I mean, look at it. If you gave Florida Missouri's schedule, they're a conference team. They're in the SEC. They're a top 10-ish, 12-ish team. if I'm a Missouri fan and I look at that schedule, if I'm not in the college football playoff, I'm pretty disappointed as a fan. I mean, Alabama thinks their toughest schedule, or their toughest team on the schedule. If Florida had that schedule, I think the over under win total would probably be 6.5. I think it's worth 2 wins, maybe even 3 at 7.5, because that is a cakewalk of an SEC schedule. So schedule inequality is still, factoring in here. But Mark, I do stand by. If this thing is headed in the right direction, schedule be damned. We should see wins mount up.
Texas's SEC opponents went 19-37 last year in the SEC. I was running those numbers because I was doing the obvious Oklahoma-Texas comparison, where they don't have the schedule Florida does, but they've got a tough schedule. And I just don't agree with coming out with these schedules that are so completely different in the same conference. I tell you, David, if this team is 7-5 and they are not securely in the top 25, then people aren't evaluating correctly. They need to toss the record, say, this team went 7-5 against the schedule. They should be like number 18 in the country. And if they go 8-4, and I'll even give them one blowout, say they lose to Georgia 42-14, and the other 3 are close, respectable games against really good top 10 teams, this team could have an argument to go to the playoff.
I think some things would have to break. I've seen that talk before. An 8-4 Florida team making the college football playoff. I think some other things would have to break their way. But if other teams are in that, if they are grouped together in that, and Florida has one more loss than a bunch of 3-loss teams, maybe head-to-head factors in. Who are those losses and all that. Certainly, I'd have a hard time defending an 8-4 team in a playoff, Mark. But at the same time, as you said, if chaos happens and there's a bunch of teams grouped together, I do think this Gator team would get the benefit of a doubt, Mark, because this schedule has been talked about by every single college football analyst out there. Everybody knows how tough it is going in. Now, it would have to live up to its reputation as well, going in. But at the same time, that also means those teams are grouped together. It could be because some teams fell back to Florida. Maybe they aren't as good as we thought they would be. So it works both ways, I think. But at the same time, we'd have to see how the rest of the season played out. But it would be a crazy controversy the first year of a 12-team playoff, and you get a 8-4 Florida team in.
Well, I'm rooting for you. Which means, David, I'm always rooting for you.
Yeah.
Obviously. But I'm actually rooting for your football team this year because I just think the schedule is ridiculous. And I would love to see them kind of throw up a bird to the critics and say, hey, we made it through and had a really good season. That would be fun to see. Yeah,
my Gator Nation too. I think most of Gator Nation wants Billy Napier to succeed. I mean, I think behind the scenes, talk about the person. Billy Napier's a great guy, great person. It's year 3. It's time to win some ball games. I think most of Gator Nation would just love for it to work out with Billy Napier and have him be here for a long time.
David Waters, Gators Breakdown. David, we always appreciate the time, sir.
Thanks, Mark.